The year is 1195. You are 12 years old, and your mother has just told you that in 1 month you will be married. What do? How do you feel? Are you excited to start your new life? Do you have any idea what's in store for you? Let's find out together. For you, 12-year-old viewer, life might seem pretty simple, maybe even fun. You might still enjoy playing games with friends, reading books, or watching your favorite shows. School can sometimes be annoying, but overall, life is good. You live in a modern country, so there are rules protecting your rights as a child. There are laws against people who might want to harm you, and hopefully your parents are kind and caring. But imagine if your life was very different. Imagine if instead of living now, you lived back in the Middle Ages. Would things be so great then? What would happen to you if you were born a girl in the Middle Ages and got married at 12? Well, let's travel back in time and find out. A word of warning, though. Medieval life was not a fairy tale. In fact, it was very harsh and unfair, especially for young girls. If you were born a girl in medieval times, you had very little rights. Your life would be decided by your father or husband. You would probably have very little education, and your body would be used to produce children whether you liked it or not. As a girl, your childhood would basically end when you turned 12. At this age, you would be considered a woman and capable of producing children. This is why many girls were married as young as 12, and even younger in medieval times. In many parts of medieval Christian Europe, the Catholic Church actually set the age of consent for girls at 12. For boys, it was set at 14. Interestingly, the Church made this decision based solely on biological capability to have children and not on psychological or emotional maturity. Girls as young as 12 were seen as capable of giving consent because they could now have their period. This might seem shocking today, but back then, menstruation was viewed as proof of full sexual maturity and ability, regardless of actual mental development. The Church took this position despite knowing that young girls were often coerced into sex and marriage without their true consent. It was common for girls to be married off as young as 12 or 13, even though they did not have the emotional or mental capacity to fully understand what was happening to them. But this wasn't only the case in medieval Europe. Many parts of the Islamic world, feudal Asia and Africa and the Middle East, also allowed and practiced child marriages for girls. So you see, even if you were born a boy in medieval times, your life wouldn't be very fun either. You would have to take on responsibilities way too early and miss out on being a kid. Why did people allow this? Well, there were three main reasons. First, child marriage was convenient. If you were a king, marrying your young daughter to another king's son meant you could form an alliance. Both families could unite and help each other gain power and land. This is exactly what happened with Eleanor of Castile. She was only 11 years old when her father, the King of Castile, arranged for her to marry the 13-year-old King of England. Young Eleanor was sent away from her family and had to adjust to living in a completely new country while also trying to fulfill her role as queen. On the other hand, if you were a peasant, marrying off your daughter at a young age meant she could help your family survive. Having a daughter was expensive, and having her around meant that your family had to spend extra money on food and clothing. Marrying her off to an older man, or even to a family that needed a daughter to help them work the fields, was a way to get rid of the financial burden of taking care of her. Often a bride's family would receive gifts, usually in the form of grain or livestock, to help them through the year. In this situation, it might sound like a good deal, but really it just meant that your daughter would become someone else's property. She would be forced to do hard labor and have no say in what was happening to her. The second reason why child marriage was common in medieval times is because it was considered normal. Most people didn't question the practice because it had been going on for so long. Even though girls got married really young, people didn't think anything of it because everyone did it. They thought that young girls could handle being a wife and mother. But we know now that this isn't true. Marrying a young girl meant that she would have to grow up fast and miss out on being a kid. It also meant that she would have very little say in what happened to her. Her body would be used to produce children whether she wanted to or not. And if she tried to say no or stop it, no one would believe her. This is why most girls didn't speak up against child marriage. They were afraid that people wouldn't believe them and that they would be punished. Finally, the third reason why child marriage was allowed is because no one cared about young girls. Back then, girls were seen as second-class citizens. They had very few rights and were mostly seen as property. People believed that girls were inferior to boys and that they should be obedient and quiet. This meant that girls couldn't go to school or learn how to read. They were also not allowed to own property or make decisions for themselves. All of this led to a lot of problems for young girls in medieval times. They were forced to get married at a very young age and often had no say in who they were marrying. This meant that many girls ended up being abused by their husbands. And since they couldn't read or write, they couldn't get help or speak up against their abusers. So what happened when a young girl got married? Well, first of all, she would have to move in with her husband and his family. This meant leaving behind her own family and friends and starting a new life in a new place. She would have to adjust to living with new people and following their rules. And if her husband's family was strict, this could be very difficult. A young bride would also have to start working right away. She would have to help with household tasks like cooking and cleaning, as well as take care of children. This meant that she would not have much time to herself and would not be able to enjoy her childhood. She would also have to follow her husband's rules and listen to him at all times. This meant that she would not be able to make decisions for herself and would have to do everything that her husband asked her to do. If she didn't follow her husband's rules, she could be punished. This could mean being beaten or not being given food. And finally, a young bride would have to deal with other people's comments and questions about her body. Since she would most likely be much younger than her husband, people would often talk about her body and ask questions about her virginity. This would be very embarrassing for her and could make her feel uncomfortable. Even though life was tough for young brides, some of them managed to gain power later on. If a woman was married to a powerful man, she could use her position to help others. For example, Eleanor of Castile became the Queen of England when she married the future King Edward I. This gave her a lot of power, and she was able to use it to help women in England. However, stories like this were rare, and most young brides did not have the same luck. Over time, more and more people started to speak up against child marriage. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke began arguing for the rights of children. They said that children were not just small adults and that they deserved to be treated differently. Slowly but surely, more and more countries began to pass laws that made child marriage illegal. And today, most countries have laws protecting children from being forced into marriage. However, even today, child marriage happens all the time. It is estimated that millions of girls are married before they turn 18. This is most common in places where people are poor, don't have access to education, and where there are harmful gender roles and stereotypes. Child marriage is a problem that affects people all over the world, and it is something that we need to work hard to stop. So what can we do to help? One of the best things that we can do is to spread awareness about child marriage. We need to teach people about the harmful effects of child marriage and why it is wrong. We also need to support organizations that are working to end child marriage. These organizations are doing important work to protect children and help them get the education and support they need. Finally, we need to be good role models and stand up for what is right. When we see something wrong, we need to speak up and help put an end to child marriage. As you have seen, getting married at 12 was a scary and difficult thing to go through. Young girls were forced to grow up too quickly and miss out on being children. They were also at risk of abuse and had very little rights. Although child marriage is illegal in many countries today, it is still a big problem. Millions of girls are still married before they turn 18. This is why it is important to remember the stories of these girls and to work hard to protect children's rights. By educating ourselves and speaking out against child marriage, we can help make sure that no child has to go through what these girls went through. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment.